quick note. If you want to understand what really makes people succeed in German and how you can build a language to actually use it, join my free live workshop at bettergerman.info/workshop. You do not need necessarily a native speaker to practice, particularly if you're at the very beginning. However, it is very important to get to listen to native speakers and learn how to say a word. The very, very first thing is whenever you can, try to get the pronunciation ideally from a native speaker. Welcome to the Better German podcast. I'm Susi Blumel, a German teacher and founder of Better German. This podcast helps you learn German in a simple and clear way, with useful words, clear sentence structures, pronunciation, and real-life topics from daily life and culture. You'll also get tips for learning German and understanding how the language actually works. And when you're ready, we have a free community and courses to support you even more. Hello, welcome to the next episode of the Better German podcast. Today what we're going to do is I'm going to cover a few ideas on how to practice German. So basically what a few of you have communicated to me is that you feel, and this was particularly people that do not live in Germany or Austria, but I'm going to cover things for both groups. But anyway, what was communicated is that they had trouble actually practicing German, like finding people to speak German. So the first thing I want to cover is that someone recently told me he needed to find native German-speaking people, and it was almost impossible. And basically, he thought that was the reason why he couldn't continue learning German. And I wanted to say something about that. I've made this observation, and by the way, this is not true about just learning German. It's the same thing with English. There is a very, very, very big importance given to the idea that you can only learn a foreign language by talking to or being taught by native speakers. There is many institutes that even kind of like look for people that have the language as a native language and not necessarily anything else other than that. For example, that would mean like that I would place the highest necessity when I was looking for German teachers to teach German for me, that I would value the fact that they're native speakers over any other people skills, teaching skills, or anything. And in my observation, my personal observation, teaching both English and German as a foreign language, I'm telling you, I don't think that just the fact that somebody speaks a native language or a language natively does not make him a good teacher. And I know that for a fact. I'm originally trained an English teacher, so my native language is German. Maybe if you've been following me, you know that I'm sorry, but I'm coming to a point here about this native speaker thing, and it has something to do with practicing. The point is, I grew up speaking German. I learned English as a second language. I literally started tutoring people in English when I was like 11 years old. I helped another student of mine, for example, that was my first student, actually. Her name was Claudia. She was a colleague of mine. She was a fellow student. And she had problems in English. I was a good student in English. And we were, during the school year, I think it was our second grade in what we call Gymnasium in Austria. So that would be the sixth grade in total. And we were about 11 years old, as I said, and she had troubles, and she was almost failing the class. So in June, she had an exam. And in that exam, like an oral exam, that would decide whether she was going to fail the class or not. We learned. I learned with her. I helped her. And she passed. So that was my first teaching experience, by the way. That story I have never told anybody. So the point here is I learned English as a second language, and that's how I kind of thought I had the idea on how to teach it to someone else. Many, many, many years later, I actually found the way how I'm teaching English as a second language now. So I did my English teacher education in St. Louis in a place called Spanish Lake. It's Applied Scholastics International. And I did my teacher training there. The system was amazing. It was like not so much grammar, and we were using a lot of building vocabulary, practicing from the first lesson, building sentences. It was amazing. Even though I was obviously fluent at that time, I was also on a translations project. So yes, I was like really thrilled. I was so thrilled that I did my teacher English education, and I started teaching English after that. I made it my job. I hadn't particularly planned that. At that point in time, I came there because it was a great opportunity and I wanted to help, and I was on a translations project. And then I came back and I started teaching English. But I went back to Austria, and there were a lot of people that didn't speak. I mean, there are a lot of people in Austria that don't speak German as a native language or don't speak German. And they asked me if I couldn't teach them. I actually started teaching right at that time. But honestly, deep down, I didn't really like it so much because I didn't have the same level of simplicity, and I hadn't figured out how to teach German on the same level of simplicity at that time. And I'm telling you, it is hard because when you learn German as a kid, it's different than when you teach German and when you learn it as a native speaker. That is a fact. I mean, you're not going to go back and seriously try to learn German or any language exactly the same way you learned your native language, because when you learn your native language, it took you years. It took you years until you even started speaking. So you spend a lot of time, and I don't think it makes sense to try to learn another language exactly, like 100% in the same way. But I also think it doesn't work to do it the way it is very often done now in schools, meaning that you only learn it based on grammar and so on. So that's not what I'm saying. However, the point I wanted to make is just the fact that somebody is a native speaker does not necessarily mean that he knows how to explain his language. This is probably a too long introduction to tell you that you do not need necessarily a native speaker to practice, particularly if you're at the very beginning. However, it is very important to listen to native speakers and learn how to say a word. That is something that's helpful. So let's go through. How can you practice without necessarily needing a native speaker? We're going to include that thing too, however. Good. The very, very first thing is whenever you can, try to get the pronunciation ideally from a native speaker. So for example, when you learn in any of my courses, you will learn the pronunciation because you will either hear me, depending on what type or what tier or what lesson you are, but you will hear me say the words. Then, and that is the very first part, and you can do that, is you need to repeat it. So if you can't, at this point in time and in this age, I would say, even when you learn by yourself, get a YouTube video, or even get a dictionary that has a spoken pronunciation, or even get AI like ChatGPT. When they pronounce something in German, that is a good pronunciation. So get a pronunciation, and that is a very important part of practicing, repeat it until you can say it. Maybe you have had the thought, maybe I'm not good at German. Then I want to assure you that's not the point. That's not the problem. I'm going to show you what is the problem. And how I show you is I have actually put together a workshop. It's a free live workshop on Zoom. And in there, I'm going over what could make you think that. We'll cover what could go wrong, but I'm also going to show you how can it be done right? So go to bettergerman.info/workshop and sign up for the workshop, and I'll see you there. Good. Then there's that's next part that you still can do alone is when you learn new words, make sentences, or when you learn sentences, say them out loud and say everything that you learn. Make as many sentences as you can, and definitely more than you think you need to do. It's not one. And do not stop because it is hard. That's the reason to continue. You need to continue until it is easier. Good. So that's one thing. Whatever you learn, just say it out loud. This is something that I cover in detail in a course. I'm just getting ready. I'm just putting together a course that is going to start. Delivery is going to start in February 26th, depending on when you hear that. I'm starting this course not all the time, so I'm starting it at specific times of the year. So the next time it is starting is in February 26th. In that course, it's called Get Talking, German for Beginners and Restarters. We have very detailed lessons and even practice lessons to actually practice how you do that. How do you learn new words, and what is the practice that you need to do, that you can do so you can actually use these words. Good. So another thing that's probably the best thing is you can do it and should do it. That's number 2, by the way. In combination with number 1 is find a study partner. So what do I mean with a study partner? A study partner would be somebody who is ideally on the same level as you, working through the same materials. Whatever you do is you practice it with each other. And you think, sometimes people may think that doesn't work. I'm telling you that is the best thing you do. Because you will learn when you speak, but you will also learn when you listen. Ideally, this is happening at least sometimes with support from a teacher or with feedback. That would be even better. So that's the second part. You find a partner, and I'm telling you this is one of the best ways because you will be responsible for each other and you have the same success as you have as a teacher. I'm telling you, I've never learned as much German and about the German language than I did after I started teaching German. So I'm telling you, when you work together with a partner and you practice in a way that you really make sure that he understands it, when he makes a sentence, so for example, you learn the word der Tisch, the table, and you make sentences. So you would say something like, mein Tisch ist weiß. My table is white. And then your partner is like, okay. He's like really thinking about it, like, yeah, this sentence is correct. You're very beginner, so that's why this is still a challenge. And then maybe you say the next sentence and you say, meine Tisch ist groß. And then your partner will say, meine? And then you'll go, oh, no, yes, of course. Mein Tisch ist groß. My table is big. and not meine. This is the correct way, because your partner will have just gone through the same materials and he will have to think and look, is that correct what you're saying? And he will learn just as much as you, and the other way around when you switch places. So practice with a partner. By the way, I think I mentioned that in my course. I am making sure that is one of the things when I did my research of what students need in order to learn, is like, that is the number one thing that actually came up. They didn't know with who to practice. They didn't even go into how, because they didn't have anybody. So I heard it and definitely this is going to be an important part of my program. We will have specific lessons, we'll have specific sessions, I would want to say, where designed to pair you up with a good practicing partner. We will also make sure that you know how to practice. Good. Next way, number 3 of what you can do to practice. And again, this works no matter which country you're in. You can find a tandem partner. So there's groups dedicated to find them. What is a tandem? A tandem typically is, so you speak, let's say, English, and that's your native language, and you find somebody whose native language you want to learn. This podcast is about learning German, so let's assume that you will find somebody who speaks German. So you offer, okay, I'll exchange my English knowledge for your German knowledge. I suggest this not to you necessarily when you're completely new, but when you're relatively advanced. That is a very good way, if you find a partner that you get along with well, to continue learning. So you will both speak with each other in both languages, and you will exchange your language knowledge. So there is tandem partners. Sometimes there's tandem groups, and these groups are usually dedicated to pairing up people. You can just look into Facebook and go language tandem partners, tandem language, and you will find groups there. Then, of course, generally there could be German language groups. And sometimes, if you post in them, you can find a partner. Like, for example, the practicing thing that we covered in hour number 1, how you could find someone if you're not in a course that has dedicated sessions or has this built into the curriculum. You could go and find yourself a partner there. Also, if you join the Better German community, that is going to be the Better German podcast community. I'm renaming it, but at this time, it's still called the Better German community. If you go in there, you have the possibility to post a message, and you can say, hey, I would like a practice partner. You can say how far, if you're a beginner, if you're advanced. Sometimes it could be tough to find a practice partner, but it's definitely worth it. And in the Better German community, I would like you to take that opportunity to post things like that there and react to other people. You can even talk within the community to other people. You can practice right there. And you can, of course, write. That's another thing. Actually, we're number 4. These were learning groups and communities. And now there is a sub point that I want to make within that. And you can chat. You can chat with someone in German. I don't suggest to just have Google Translate. Try to do it yourself. Don't worry about mistakes. By the way, whenever you practice, don't worry about mistakes, but clear up anything you don't understand. So if your partner says something you don't get, ask. If you can't figure it out, look in a dictionary. But don't worry about mistakes you make. If he understands you and you understand each other, perfect. Don't worry. That's not the place to worry about mistakes like that. Good. Then, another thing of practicing, and that is sometimes overlooked, is to watch German movies or TV shows or series and put it on subtitles. Actually, there is a whole podcast episode I made about this. This is the episode 14. I'm going to link it in the show notes, but you can always find every episode by going to bettergerman.info/14. And I've made a whole episode about this, and there is a movie guide. If you have any problem accessing the movie guide, then write to me at podcast@bettergerman.info, because at the time of a recording, the movie guide has a technical problem on our homepage, and I had to temporarily disable it. However, it exists, and if you write to me at podcast@bettergerman.info, if you need any infos about it, if you write to me like what's your level and what's your language, then I'm gonna send you suggestions very specifically for you. But I mean, this is if the movie guide does not work, because at the moment of the recording, I'm having technical problems here. But first you can try, because probably they should be handled by the time you listen. You go to bettergerman.info/movies. We will link it. However, if for some unforeseeable reason this doesn't work, then you can write to podcast@bettergerman.info and you include like, okay, I'm interested in the movie guide. Apparently it doesn't work at this point in time. My native language is Italian, for example, if that is your native language, and my level is, and maybe you can write you're interested in, I don't know, I don't care, I hate spy movies, I love sci-fi movies or whatever. If you include that, then we're going to send you a suggestion of a couple of movies or TV shows that you can watch. I don't necessarily suggest that to you if you're a complete beginner. If you're a complete beginner, it is probably a little hard. I definitely suggest to watch the German movie with the subtitle in your native language. Sometimes people get concerned. They're like, yeah, but then I'm only reading. That's fine. Don't worry. If you keep doing that, after some time, you're going to pick up. However, if you prefer, sometimes I've had students who watched every movie 3 times. They first watched it dubbed, if that is available. For example, I've had an English student studying English as a second language, and it's the same thing. I make all my students, once they're a little bit on an intermediate level, watch movies with subtitles. So in that case, she was watching English movies with German subtitles. So she would actually first watch it dubbed in the native language, and then she watched it in original with subtitles, and then she watched it in original with the subtitles in the original language. So for you, you can play around. You can watch the German movie if it is coming dubbed to English first, if you prefer, and so you know what's going on. And then you watch the German movie with English subtitles. And if you really feel you need to, you then watch the German movie with German subtitles. But do not begin with that. Very often my students are convinced that they will only learn if they put German subtitles. And I'm telling you, this, I do not suggest this to you until you're like learning for C1 level or something like that. And you're really super fluent and perfect. Believe me, you will learn. You will learn. I know it for a fact. I've watched a whole TV show that had a lot of Spanish parts, and I didn't speak Spanish. And at the end of the TV show, I understood Spanish pretty well. So it works, believe me. Good. Another thing you can do, so we're now at point 6. So you can join, if you have that, a local meetup. There is actually even an app called Meetup, and you could put German in there, but there could be German cultural centers, there's Goethe Institute, and so on. You can just check it out if there is any local one that you can watch and visit. So that's another thing you could do. I want to add one, and that is number 7. That is particularly, it could even exist abroad, but this one is particularly for people that live in German-speaking areas. Actually, I don't know if that is the same thing also in Germany, but in Austria, in Vienna, there is a lot of conversation places. So there is usually regular conversation classes, and they're free at many, many libraries in Vienna. So in the Bücherei in Wien, Büchereien, like Buch, one Buch is a book, Bücher is the plural, and Bücherei is a library. We have 2 words for library in German. One is Bücherei and the other one is Bibliothek. So Bücherei is kind of like a library that you go to borrow books for fun, really. I mean, of course, you can also research and so on, but it is kind of like open to the general public, to everybody, and most people that will go there to just find books to read. And very often they offer German conversation classes for free every week. And then I'm including it in the same thing. There's German Stammtisch. You can Google that. German Stammtisch. It's called Stammtisch. That is a thing, that's a term, I would say the Austrian version of a pub. And the Stammtisch is kind of like the regular table. That's the table where the regulars sit. Also, a Stammtisch is often called sort of a meeting that happens regularly in a sort of a pub, Gasthaus in Austria, or cafe. Very often there is conversation Stammtisch or German Stammtisch or German cafe, maybe it's called. And people meet there, and like people with different native backgrounds, and they practice German. Because I'm telling you, many of my students, at least half of my students, do not live in German-speaking areas. And I'm talking to students from both that live in German-speaking areas and that don't. And you may think that because you are not in a German-speaking area, it's super hard. But I'm telling you, also students that actually live in Austria sometimes have the problem that they don't have someone readily available to practice the language with them, because they live here with their family that very often speaks the same language as they do. And then they probably came here working for an international company, and then they're working in the international company, and they go home and they have their family. And so they also don't have automatically anybody to speak with. So the situation applies to both of you. You have to, that's maybe the number 1 thing, or the number 0. You have to realize that you have to arrange something for speaking. It's not necessarily or usually going to happen automatically. And it's for sure not happening automatically for you if you're listening to this podcast episode. Because if you were forced to speak German already for years regularly, you probably would already speak German. So if you have any problem with that, I understand. I'm with you. You're not alone. Just go through those points and pick one and start with it. If you really want to learn German, then I really suggest to you to take a course. And of course, I think the best course is my course. That's why I put it together. And I already said it's called Get Talking, German for Beginners and Restarters. In the moment, at the time of the issuing of this, or of the appearance of this episode, actually this episode will appear, I believe, on American Thanksgiving. So you may be not listening to it at that time. I don't know, depending on where you are and what you're busy with. But in that week until Cyber Monday, so until the Monday after Thanksgiving, there is a very private pre-sale I am offering. So this course I've mentioned, called Get Talking, German for Beginners and Restarters. It is a very cool course. I've been putting my lifeblood in it. It contains basically the gist of almost 20 years of teaching German and doing a lot of research in the last few years in how to deliver, what should be in it, what do you need, how is the best way of presenting it, and so on. And it is an online course. It's self-paced, but I'm combining because I think online courses that are self-paced have a big advantage. The big advantage is you can attend it whenever you can fit it in. I'm also making the individual lessons not too long, and most of them you can even interrupt, so you can work it into even a very busy schedule. But if you're completely by yourself and online, very often you will lack accountability and you will lack having someone to practice with. So in order for that not to happen, this course takes care of you in that respect. So you still have a community, and you will be able to find practice partners, and we schedule sessions where you will find, probably I'm putting most of you together in groups of 3 or maybe even 4. So whenever you want to practice, there is someone available. Anyway, so we're going to do that. You will have your own pod. You will have your own accountability, but you will still be able to progress in your own speed. And you're going to get what you need so you can really start speaking. So it is 20 units, and each unit has between 8 and 15 lessons. And the course is going to be yours for a lifetime, but the community support is for 6 months. So you can get through the course in that time. Even if you can't, that's totally fine. The material is there for you. The regular price for the course is going to be $597. But in the moment, around like Friday, as I said, I'm doing a sort of secret. I'm not promoting it widely everywhere. So it's a pre-sale and it's 50% off. So it's $297 instead of $597. And that's the only time I'm ever going to sell this course for that price. You cannot join the course all the time. You can either join it now. It's exactly 10 places for that price. Or you can join it when it actually starts. The delivery is starting, like the course is open in the beginning of February, on the 9th of February to be precise. And I'm only starting the course, this particular course, I'm only starting it twice a year. So anyway, that's what I wanted to tell you. And it's all about the practice. So if you need to learn German, or if you want to learn German, you can't practice enough. I hope that these points will help you. Ideally, you incorporate them all. These are not all the ways how you can practice. These are just some of them. But I think these are the most important ones. I hope you're going to tune in again next week. So next week, we're going to continue with our verbs. A few episodes ago, we started with regular verbs. In English, regular verbs are verbs like walk, walked. Okay. So in German, verbs are a little bit more fancy, I guess. They like to do more changes. So the next time we're going to learn a new category of verbs. They're also called starke Verben, strong verbs. One example would be schlafen. That's to sleep. And they're a little different than the regular ones. They're very interesting and they don't have to be hard, and we're going to go through that next week. So tune in next week again. If you have any questions at all, as always, then you can write to me at podcast@bettergerman.info, or you can leave a comment where you are. And actually, what I need to tell you, this is something kind of like important. If you want to actually make progress, I totally suggest to you to take a course. And if you want to make use of the pre-sale and use the 50% price, then just write me an email. You can write to me at susi@bettergerman.info and tell me, and I'm going to send you a link. As this is a pre-sale, there is no nicely made up sales pages and everything yet. So this is a pre-sale that I'm offering to you, as you know me already. Good. Now I'm really at the end. If you like this episode, then, or actually if you like the podcast, leave me a 5-star review. That would mean the world to me. And absolutely share it and tell other people about it. And talk to you the next time. Here is a story from one of my students. She came to Austria because of love, and she started learning German, and she tried learning German, and she learned German with different people. She had private teachers and private tutors that tried to help her, and she worked hard, and she didn't speak German. Then she came to me. I worked with her, and she was not a difficult student, frankly. Not at all. She was one of the easiest students I've ever had. We didn't do private lessons. She was in one of my small group programs, and after 2 months, she spoke German. That's her saying that, not me. Her name was Diana. And I'm not telling you this because I want to tell you how great of a teacher I am, but I'm telling this to you because what was wrong here was the method. It wasn't her, it wasn't the language. And most people, when they run into a problem, they think it's them or they think it's the language. And it's neither of them. Everyone can learn German, but you have to use the right method. So if you want to know what you can do to actually learn German, then join me in the free workshop, How to Actually Learn German. It's really a culmination of all the things that I'm using in my German programs and also in the podcast, by the way. Join me in the workshop. It's a live, free workshop with me. I'd love to see you there. It's on Zoom, and you can find out everything about it at bettergerman.info/workshop.